Have you given any thought to who is going to take care of you and the quality of your life as you age, particularly when you have long-term care needs? Because many people haven't. Many people have not focused on the financial implications of a long-term illness or particularly long-term care needs such as Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, or perhaps getting seriously injured by somebody who, in a car accident, for example, by somebody who has inadequate amounts of insurance. This is the reason why people need to look into long-term care insurance. Yet, surprisingly, not a lot of people have long-term care insurance, and they're leaving themselves exposed. I can tell you that I am a proud owner of a long-term care policy, and the reason why I bought it when I was 38 years old is because of the business that I'm in. I see catastrophic injury all the time. I see people who are injured. I see occasionally in a case in the Midwest where the minimum size policy is $25,000. I mean, you can't even buy anything for virtually for $25,000. So if you are turned into a paraplegic, okay, if you want to rely on Medicaid, you're going to have to spend down your assets or depend on others. What is the financial impact on those others, and why wouldn't you think about a way that you can essentially discount those dollars? Have you had any discussions with your spouse or your children as to where you would like to live as you age? Now, obviously, you'd probably want to be in your home for as long as you could be, but what happens if you have Alzheimer's? What happens if you develop dementia? What happens if you are in a car accident, as I mentioned? The financial impact of these particular situations can be extremely devastating. Now, I live in Connecticut, and the assisted living costs are in the close to $300 a day, about $250 on up a day. Nursing home costs are over $400 a day. Even in other parts of the country, I mean, it's cheaper, but it's still a lot of money, and it adds up, especially if you have somebody that has a long-term illness like Alzheimer's. It could be hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. Where's that money going to come from? Is that money going to impoverish a spouse? Is it going to decimate the life savings of a couple who have worked their entire lives? What about the people who have no long-term care insurance? How are they going to pay for this? Okay, you can depend on Medicaid. Anybody looked and seen what's going on with the Medicaid programs in the various different states? It's not a pretty picture. So you have the ability to take matters into your own hands. If you're 35 years old, 40 years old, 45 years old, you should be thinking about long-term care insurance for yourself. And more importantly, you should be having discussions with your parents. I did. You should have discussions with your parents. Ask them what their plans are. I have a very good friend of mine, and we were having this discussion within the last couple of months. And I said, have you addressed long-term care with your parents? And the response was, I've tried, and they refuse to talk about it. Well, kids, you know, if you run into parents that are like that, you've got to be a little bit stronger and not take no for an answer, because ultimately it's going to impact you. So maybe you got to take a different tactic. But when you think about this, if your parents don't have the assets and they don't want to get long-term care insurance, basically their option is to be your dependent or to be on Medicaid. And if they're on Medicaid, it means that the quality of their life is going to dramatically suffer. That could mean that you're going to go into assisted living, you're going to go into a nursing home and stare at the walls because you're not going to get the best quality of care. Perhaps not going to get the best quality of care. If you go with long-term care, your options are yours. You have complete control. And these policies are not cheap. Let's face it, the policies are not cheap. But if you start early enough, like I did, I started off paying $83 a month when I was 38 years old. Now the cost is up to $101 a month. It's very, very cheap when you consider what the costs are. I know what the costs are from a personal standpoint. okay? It is a absolute bargain. Long-term care insurance is a bargain when you're talking about your or your parents' quality of life when you age. With careful planning with long-term care insurance, it's possible that you can preserve assets that would otherwise have to be spent down to enable someone to have Medicaid eligibility. A number of states have established partnership, what are so-called partnership programs. The partnership programs in the majority of states are a dollar for dollar reduction or offset in the spend down requirements for Medicaid. So instead of having to spend your assets down to $2,000, if, for example, you were to expend, you had a policy that paid out $100,000, you could preserve $100,000 of assets and exempt them from the spend down requirement. That means that somebody of even fairly modest means can leave an estate to their children, as opposed to you live this long and happy life and you accumulate assets, and at the end of your life you have to decimate them. Do you want to have that quality of life? I certainly don't, and that's the reason why I bought long-term care insurance, and I had this discussion with my parents. I hope that people who are listeners of this particular program consider that for themselves and for their parents and for their employees, because there are programs where you can make this available on a group basis to your employees. I encourage you to research it and think of that as a potential solution. If you are a lawyer for someone who is coming into a personal injury settlement, just as we've talked about life insurance as part of a settlement planning process, long-term care insurance should be part of the evaluation. If somebody's getting a recovery, they've got a recovery. That recovery is a recovery at a point in time. You have to think about the future. If you have people who have family histories of dementia, what have you, they ought to be getting long-term care insurance. Even if they don't, for the reasons that I explained before, the fact that you could have somebody who has a possibility that you could find somebody get into a car accident and they can have a small amount of insurance, it's good for the quality of life and for the assurances over the future. The economy that we have today, the fact that people's retirement savings have been decimated in the volatile stock markets, it's important to be working on what we call defensive investments as opposed to just offensive investments. You've heard the expression, the best offense is a good defense. Well, long-term care insurance is one of the cornerstones, one of the four horsemen, if you will, of your defense. Thank you. I'm John Dare. If you have any questions, feel free to call me, toll free 888-325-8640. In order to sell long-term care insurance, to have it sell long-term care insurance to you, they have to be appropriately licensed and continually educated in the various different states that they're operating in. But if you have any questions, general questions, I'm happy to address them. Feel free to call me at 888-325-8640. Thank you very much and have a great day.